Okay, so we will start with suffix tree data structure in this lecture. So recall the exact matching problem. So in this problem we were given a string p, the pattern, the longer string text t. The exact pattern matching problem is to find all the occurrences of pattern p in text t. So far the two major algorithms that we have looked at is Z algorithm, in which we spent linear time, that is order p plus order t time to solve this problem. Then we said that sometimes we have very long text and therefore it makes sense to pre-process the text and build some index. So at that point we said that okay, we will build the suffix array data structure. Using suffix array data structure, we saw that the same problem now can be solved in p log t times, because now this problem is the complexity with respect to t is sublinear, and that is important because the text size can be very big in biological applications. So if we go with simple binary search iterations, then this complexity is p log t, but if you look at the best algorithm in the literature, then it is p plus log t. The topic of the today, which is suffix tree, will enable pattern matching in order p time, that is the run time will be independent of the text t. So if we assume that the suffix tree of the text is already available, that is it has been pre-computed using the pre-processing stage, then if I want to know just if whether the pattern occurs in the text or not, that is just a boolean answer yes or no, that whether the pattern occurs in the text or not, then solving that only takes order p time using suffix tree. But if I also want to report all the occurrences of the pattern, suppose there are multiple occurrences of the pattern and I want to report the location of each of those occurrences, then the data structure that we are going to study today will enable that in order p plus OCC time, where OCC represents the total number of occurrences of the pattern in the text t. Now observe that these runtimes are already optimal, because if you think in terms of the input output complexity, at least for solving this problem we have to at least read the pattern p, because the pattern only the text t was known to us in advance, the pattern p is just given to us now. So we have to at least read the pattern, which will take order p time, and if you are asking me to report all the occurrences, then as output I have to report at least OCC numbers to you. So I have to spend at least OCC time giving you the output. So OCC time is spent in giving the output and order p time is spent at least reading the input. So because this time must be spent in solving this exact matching problem, so therefore this time order p plus OCC to solve this problem is already optimal, we cannot do better than this. So suffix trees allow us to solve the exact pattern matching problem in optimal time, and we will look at how this happens in the next few slides. So to talk about suffix trees, let me briefly tell you the history of this data structure. So the history of this data structure is actually very old. It was invented in 1973 by Peter Weiner. At the time, Donald Knuth, who is one of the Turing Award winners in computer science, he called this algorithm as the algorithm of the year in 1973. The reason it was given such a high importance was that previously it was conjectured that this simple problem, that given two strings s and t, suppose we want to know the longest substring that occurs in both of them, it was conjectured that this problem cannot be solved in linear time before 1973. So at the time the best known algorithm, so if I think of n is equal to the sum of the two, it is the sum of the length of both strings, then the best known algorithm at the time was order n log n for solving this problem. And at the time it felt like it was too hard to achieve a linear time algorithm. Therefore, this conjecture was made by the Donald Knuth. Now, this conjecture was actually refuted by the binary suffix tree, and because suffix trees actually gave a linear time solution to solve this problem. So, that is why this was an important result at the time, and today suffix trees are regarded as fundamental data structures for many string problems, because many non-trivial problems that we will see later as examples can be solved elegantly using suffix tree data structure. So, given this history, let us start looking at what suffix trees mean. Now, before we look at the suffix tree data structure, we are going to look at a simpler data structure which is suffix trie, and we will come back to suffix trees later. So, suffix trie is just a natural way of indexing all the suffixes of the text T. So, suffix trie is just a smallest tree such that each edge of the tree is labeled with a character from the alphabet. So, in this particular example, I am using the text T as A, B, A, B, A dollar. My alphabet is A, comma B, comma dollar, because this is what I am using to build the text. Observe that each edge of the suffix trie is labeled with a character from the alphabet. Now, every node of a suffix trie, it can have at most one outgoing edge labeled C. So, for example, any node cannot have two edges labeled with character A. It can have at most, a node can have at most one edge labeled with character A, it can have at most one edge labeled with character B, and it can have at most one edge labeled with character dollar. So, this is not allowed, and you can see that in the right hand side example also that this property is satisfied, that each node has at most one outgoing edge labeled with a particular character from the alphabet. The final property is that every suffix of the text T is spelled by some path from the root in this tree. So, for example, if I take any suffix of this text T, let us say A, B, A dollar, which is spelled by this suffix, then this can be spelled by a path from root onwards. So, if you say A, B, A dollar, so all the suffixes are spelled by some path from the root node. Now, observe that this path will be unique because of this property, that a vertex cannot have two edges with the same label. So, therefore, when I spell a suffix, the path, if the suffix exists as a path from the root node, then that path must be unique. Okay. So, now I have a following question: will all suffix paths that start from the root node, will all of them end at the leaf node of this tree, or can a suffix path end at an internal node as well? Well, if you think about it, the suffix paths must end at the leaf nodes, they cannot end at the internal nodes. For example, suppose if we can easily prove by contradiction. So, suppose a suffix path Si is a internal node. So, then what that means is that must happen only when a suffix Si is a prefix of a longer suffix Sj, only then that is possible. But that is not, this condition cannot happen, that a suffix Si is a prefix of a longer suffix Xj, because we are assuming that our text is ending with special symbol dollar, and dollar cannot occur anywhere in the text except the last position. So, if Si is occurring as a prefix, then Sj must be having dollar symbol in the middle of it, and that is not possible, and therefore, all the suffix paths must end at the leaf nodes, and the final edge just before the leaf node will be labeled with dollar symbol. So, you can see that all the edges above the leaf nodes are labeled with the dollar symbol, because that is where all the suffixes are ending. And how many leaves will this tree have? Well, this for each suffix you will have one leaf. So, in a text T you will have size of text T as leaves nodes in the tree. Okay. So, now the suffix trie data structure, the reason for studying this data structure is that it solves many of the queries like exact pattern matching problem very trivially. For example, if I want to know whether a given pattern P occurs as a substring of text T, and suppose I have already built the suffix trie of text T. So, I have this data structure with me. Determining whether pattern P occurs in T is very simple, because all I need to do is start looking for the pattern from the root node onwards. So, I start one character at a time from the pattern. So, for example, if my pattern is A, B, A, so if my pattern is A, B, A, then I start matching from the root node, and if I am able to match all the characters of the pattern, then I know that the pattern occurs in the text T. If I also want to know in the second question whether pattern P is a suffix of text T, then I have to make an additional check that where the node where my search ends, that node must be a parent of the leaf node. If that happens, then I can also answer my second question, that whether pattern P is a suffix of text T or not. So, the search for the pattern must end at a node which is a parent of a leaf node. What about third question, where we want to count how many times pattern occurs in the text T? Well, for this all we need to do is again search for the pattern from the root node, start exhausting all the characters of the pattern. So, one at a time until you have exhausted all the characters of the pattern. So, once you have searched for complete pattern, we end at a node of a tree. Now, to know the count of occurrences, all we need to do is to look at the subtree of that node, because the subtree of the node will tell me the suffix IDs on which the pattern was located. So, if I can locate all the leaf nodes in the subtree, those leaf nodes will tell me how many times is that pattern occurring in the text, because each leaf node corresponds to a unique suffix. So, this, for example, a leaf node tells me that the pattern occurs as a prefix of this suffix. Similarly, the pattern occurs as a prefix of this suffix as well. The last query, which is slightly requires a little bit more thinking, is how do I know what is the longest repetitive string in text T? So, for this one I am not given any pattern, I just want to know what is the longest repetitive string in text T. So, you have the text T and I want to know, for example, what is the longest repetitive string. So, in this particular example you can see that ABA is the longest repetitive string in this given text. So, how can I use suffix trie to answer this query? Well, observe that if there is a longest repetitive string, then the following characters, that is the following characters after. So, suppose alpha is the longest repetitive string. So, at least there are 2 occurrences of alpha in the text T. The next character after the alpha must be different. So, if the character here is beta, the character here is gamma, and beta is not equal to gamma, because otherwise I have a longer repeating string. So, therefore, beta and gamma must be different. Now, what that means is this alpha string, if I look at the path from the root node that spells the alpha string, then once that path is spelled out, once the string alpha is spelled, it must diverge into 2 children, at least 2 children. Therefore, I can answer my query number 4 by seeking for the deepest node in the suffix trie which has at least 2 children, because all those nodes correspond to repeating strings in text tree, and if I look for the deepest such node, then I get the longest repetitive string spelled by the path from the root node until that node. So, in this particular case you can see that ABA was the repeating longest repeat, and in fact ABA is this one is the deepest node where you have at least 2 children. So, this suffix trie immediately tells you that, and using a linear traversal of the trie data structure, I can easily locate the deepest node which has at least 2 children. Okay. So, to summarize, this is what I just said for answering these queries, and you can revisit as you feel the need for it. So, this is just repeating what I just said, that each query can be conveniently answered by using suffix trie, and you can see that for each query I have a single sentence algorithm. So, the answering these queries is very convenient using suffix trie. So, that is the best part of suffix trie, is that it can enable answering of such queries very conveniently. Okay. So, that is the good part of suffix trie. Well, how about the construction algorithm? So, how do we construct a suffix trie data structure if you are given a text T? So, imagine that you are given a text T of length n, right, and the text T we assume that it ends with dollar symbol. We will again use the notation that T0 is the suffix starting from position 0, T1 is a suffix starting from position 1, and so on. What would be the naive algorithm to build suffix trie? Well, the naive algorithm to build suffix trie would be to add one suffix at a time, right. So, either you can add these suffixes in the reverse order, Tn-1, Tn-2 and so on, or you can even reverse the order. So, you can add T0 first, T1 first, T2 then, and so on. So, the order is not important. So, we can follow any order. So, let us say we go with this order, that we start with Tn-1, Tn-2 and so on, and incrementally we keep on adding each suffix in the suffix trie. The idea in the way each suffix will be added will be that, suppose we have an intermediate tree that we have built from Tn-1, Tn-2 until Ti plus 1, and now suppose we are adding Ti. All we need to do is to look for, first think of Ti as a pattern and start matching characters of Ti in the tree. At the point where we see the first mismatch, from there on we have to start creating new nodes. So, as an example on the right, you can see that we have already built a suffix trie data, we are building a suffix trie data structure. So, we have added 3 suffixes, that $, $, and $. Now, we have to add $, so I am sorry, $. So, that is the next suffix that we are supposed to add. So, for this I am going to search in this trie data structure. So, the first character matches, however, the next character is a mismatch. So, from there on I can add new nodes B, A and $, right. So, this will be labeled with B, this will be labeled with A, and this will be labeled with dollar symbol, because in suffix trie we are labeling edges, not vertices. So, we will continue to add new nodes and label the edges as necessary. So, in this iteration I have added the new suffix A, B, A, $, and we can repeat this process. So, we can add the next suffix, the next suffix and so on. All we have to remember is that first we have to search for that suffix in the existing trie, and from the first character where we see a mismatch, we will start augmenting new nodes and edges. Now, how much time is this going to take? Well, for each suffix, so for example, for adding Ti, I may need, in the worst case, so for Ti I have to need the length of Ti as a runtime. So for example, I have to spend each character at a time, either it is a match, and when I stop matching, then I have to add edges and nodes accordingly. So the runtime is basically the summation of all the suffixes lengths, right. So the runtime that we are spending is the sum of all the suffix lengths, which is order n square in the worst case, correct. So in fact, actually in this case the suffix this is not just a worst case, but this particular algorithm is going to need n square time, because we are doing n square computations. What about space? So we have discussed the time, that is taking quadratic time. What do you think about space? How much space do we need to store suffix tries? Well, to think about space complexity, we have to look at the number of nodes in the suffix trie, and this is assuming that each node takes order 1 space. So for example, in every node we will keep the pointers of its children, right. So in a tree, for every node we maintain the pointers of its children, and the number of children cannot exceed the alphabet size. So the number of children must be less than equal to the alphabet size. If we assume that the alphabet size is constant, then we can easily imply that each node is going to require order 1 space, right. So this assuming that alphabet is a constant is a reasonable assumption, because typically we are working with small alphabet sizes. So for example, in DNA we have alphabet of size 4, in English text we have alphabet size 6, 26 and so on. So these alphabets are typically small. So here we can make a safe assumption that alphabet size is constant, and we can ignore the number of pointers that we need to store at each node. Therefore, the space needed for each node is going to be order 1, and all we have to do is count the number of nodes in the suffix trie. So what do you think, how many nodes do we need to represent in the suffix trie? What will be the worst case, or what would be the best case scenario? Well, one upper bound that we can obtain is from here itself, that as we are augmenting these suffixes, so for when we are augmenting suffix Ti, in the worst case we may need to add Ti new number of nodes. So n square is certainly upper bound for the total number of nodes in the tree. Is that bound tight? Well, it turns out yes, that in the worst case a suffix trie may need order n square nodes, and for this we can see a particular example. So for example, on the left side you see a worst case scenario where I am using an example where the text T includes some consecutive characters A, and then it is followed by consecutive characters B. So here A raised to power k means k consecutive A characters followed by k consecutive B characters. So let us, as an example, I have drawn the suffix trie of this string, and you can easily see that in this worst case example I already have more than k square number of edges that are labeled B, because observe that once you add the suffixes corresponding to the B cube term, now as you add AB cube you will have to introduce a new path. Similarly, if you add AB cube, you will have to introduce a new path from the second character of A onwards. Now if I add AA B cube, I will share the first two characters, but then onwards I have to add a completely new path. So each time the B characters, the nodes corresponding to B characters are being added as fresh. So as a result, this particular example you can see that it has more than k square number of nodes with B labeled edges. So this easily tells you that the worst case space complexity is order n square, because we have a specific example that we can see that already uses order n square space. Now there can be good scenarios also. For example, on the right side you see a best case scenario where my example is few consecutive A characters followed by dollar symbol. In this case you can see that as I am augmenting new suffix, I am able to use many edges from the previous suffix already. So for example, if I am adding for in this particular case I am showing this example. So suppose when I am adding the last suffix, I am able to use many edges from the previous construction, and all I need to do add is one more A character and a dollar symbol. So in this particular example you have k nodes with A labeled edges and k plus 1 nodes which have outgoing dollar labeled edges. So this particular example, this requires linear space, but the worst case remains quadratic, right. So in the worst case the suffix trie data structure requires order n square space, right. So this is going to be a bad thing, like the suffix trie, the space requirement is order n square in the worst case, and if a data structure requires order n square in the worst case, then observe that the worst case construction time can also not be improved from n square. So for example, the algorithm that we discussed here is the best we can do. So this quadratic time complexity algorithm for constructing suffix tries, the runtime is already the best we can do, because if I am building a data structure which requires order n square space, I cannot build it faster than order n square. I need to spend at least order n square time to build a data structure that requires order n square space. So worst case construction time cannot be improved from n square, and because of this limitation suffix tries do not scale to large text. For example, human genome. So the good part was that suffix tries allow you to solve very many number of queries conveniently, but the bad part is that the space and runtime requirements of constructing it as well as saving it are quadratic, which is much larger than we can allow for large texts. Therefore let us look at the suffix trie data structure. So in the next video we will look at the suffix tree data structure, which will in summary be the good minus bad. So it will retain the good properties of the suffix trie data structure, but it will get rid of the bad properties, that is the space and time that we needed to build the suffix trie, it will get rid of that. So that is why I am calling it as a good minus bad, because it retains the good properties and gets rid of the bad properties. Okay, thank you.